This is episode 4 of our Disaster Ready Church series on ADRA TV. Last time we learned about the importance of setting up a team with dedicated members that play vital roles and functions before, during, and after a disaster strikes.
The Disaster Ready Church is not a one-man show. You can hardly get anything done if you depend on just one person. And in order for us to be effective in our communities, we need to put a collection of people together with one purpose.
And yes, I do remember last time we also cracked the code. We spent time discussing about the code of conduct, those 10 statements that guide our action towards those we serve in the communities.
Yes, Shan, and today we're excited to talk about the last step of being a disaster-ready church, and that is my response. We're going to be unraveling practical ways that we can deliver help and not harm to our communities. Only here on
ADRA TV.
Welcome back, everyone, and it's good to have you once again. I'm so happy I'm still here with KJ, Prabuk, and Shaina. And for the last few episodes, we have had an interesting journey so far, and we have 2 more episodes left in the series of Disaster Ready Church. But first, let's recap on the 4 steps that can be taken to be disaster ready. What was the 4th step again, guys?
My church, my community, my team, and my response.
And today, we will talk about my response.
Chantal, I think you're confusing our viewers a little bit because in your introduction you said we have 2 more episodes, but I'm sure the viewers who have been following us faithfully will count and say, hey, this is the 4th episode and this is the last step. So what's going to be next?
Well, because we have a treat for them.
Oh, a treat. Oh, okay.
Because everybody that's watching, we will have one special episode on PFA.
PFA? What's PFA?
So PFA stands for Psychological First Aid. I'd like to repeat that again. PFA stands for Psychological First Aid, and I will keep everybody hanging, and we'll talk more about it on the next episode.
Today we will cover 2 main topics. First are the 2 key standards that we need to be aware of in planning and putting together a response, and the second topic will focus on practical steps that can be taken to plan your own response.
Now, it's important to understand that the 5 ADRA TV episodes alone will not be adequate to come up with a final response plan. But we hope that when you watch these episodes and match it with the manual, which you will be coming, then you'll have what you need to put together a disaster response.
Okay, let's get right into it. Shaina, what are the steps we need to take in planning or pre-planning a response?
Okay, let me list down the steps that you will find in the manual. First, conducting a rapid needs assessment. Second, setting up a selection criteria. Third, identifying potential intervention scenarios. And then 4th, building a budget. And then 5th and last, conducting a post-distribution monitoring.
Okay, let's break this down a little more. Shaina, can you talk a little more about that rapid needs assessment and how you do that here in the Philippines?
Sure, KJ. To make things easy, we have a standard format that we have developed to use during a disaster. This tool has been shared with the ACS teams here in the Philippines, and they usually gather the data on behalf of ADRA. There are many times that ADRA would also send a team to collect the data.
Now, just to maybe add to this team, you don't necessarily have to go with a pen and paper and a clipboard to collect data like we used to maybe 10-15 years ago. You have many softwares, many applications that you can use from your mobile phone to collect data. One of such applications is called Kobo Collect, and we will put these links or this, how people can access these apps on the screen as we speak. But you can use this, for example, Kobo Collect to deploy, we call deploy a form, and then people could go to the field and just type in the information on their mobile devices, and you would have information in real time. And this actually increases the speed of data collection.
Okay, so this is a predetermined template of questions. Is that what you mean when you say a tool?
Yes, we have them all set up in advance. Depending on the disaster, this tool can be customized very quickly, and we will also include a sample questionnaire or tool in the manual.
Yes, and as mentioned by Prabhu, it doesn't have to be necessarily you have to use a pen and a paper. So you can use it's like a software, right?
Correct.
The Kobo Collect. And what I know is that for example, if I'd be assigned to go and assess and I have my phone or tablet and I go there, even if you don't have internet connection, does it work when you don't have internet connection?
Yes,
Kobo
it does. It does. You can actually download the form, and it doesn't. It's not dependent on being connected to the internet. When you come back from the field, you can upload it.
And it's completely free. Do
It's
they
free.
have to pay? Oh, okay.
It's free, and actually students could use it for their data collection. It's not limited to emergency response. So
Yes.
there's a lot of potential with this type of applications.
Yes, and then they can also show statistics, pie graph, and all, so to see what.
They can give results immediately.
Yes, exactly. But I have a question. What if we have a lot of people affected and our resources are limited? Like after the assessment, we find out that a lot has been affected and oops, this is what we only have.
This is actually when we use the selection criteria.
So just to give a little bit of details of what this selection criteria is, and this is, I think, the second step that you mentioned, Shaina. Resources will always be limited, right? And then you will always have a number of people who are affected that you really can't serve. And in many cases, the truth is that sometimes people don't need a lot of assistance also. It is the most vulnerable that actually get hit the most. Therefore, we usually go with a selection criteria to make sure that we go and meet the needs of the most vulnerable people who really have a hard time to help themselves. And this actually also solves the problem of needing to plan to help everyone, right? So generally, the recommendation is to go with a criteria that says, for example, we will prioritize female-headed households, families with at least one child below 5, or families that have people with disabilities. And this could actually change based on the context. Now, churches would be doing a community assessment, right, based on the second step, my community. And based on this, churches could actually put together a criteria in advance and also accommodate changes as needed.
So that answers the question that because it's so overwhelming to help everybody, right? So you have to have a criteria, prioritization.
Correct.
That's very important.
Yeah, this also brings us to the point that you need to prepare a plan in advance, which is such a crucial step and is really the core of the Disaster Ready Church program, because the whole point of this is to design what we would do even before the disaster comes.
Okay, so how do we plan for this?
So, in short, you have to look at the steps that you took so far. So through My Church, you would have by now identified the resources that you have at your disposal as a church, including the capacity of your human resources, right? Through My Community, you would have analyzed and captured basic data about your community and what type of needs would arise if a disaster happens. Through My Team, you have identified the skills and competencies of the team that you have now put together to respond. If you couple these three together and analyze it a bit, you will be able to assume, or you would be able to put some response together to say, based on our capacity, we are able to run a kitchen, for example. We are able to do psychological first aid only because we don't have access to a lot of finances. But at the same time, you might be able to say, yes, we have access to a lot of finances. We will do some distribution of hygiene kits likewise.
Okay.
Once the plan is put in place, the team needs to work on a budget that will be needed to respond. Again, encourage churches or faith groups to design something that will match their capacity only and something not too ambitious that cannot be done.
And ideally, we need to document our plan, so we'll end up with a church emergency management plan, or a CHEMP as the final product. That's what we call it for short, a CHEMP. You will find templates in the manual and they will help your team to put a CHEMP together.
I think that word CHEMP is very important. And let me say that again. A CHEMP is, let us say it together,
Church Emergency Management Plan.
Okay, so now we have discussed several components of this Church Emergency Management Plan, or CHEMP. We shared a little bit about the rapid needs assessment. We gave some guidance on how to develop a plan. It's broad level, we agree, and you will have to work a little bit more with the manual. Then also you can put together a budget based on the response that you have or want to do. Also, it's important to identify a selection criteria. Now, the last step is to have some type of post-distribution monitoring, which is more or less a type of a simple evaluation, let me put it that way, to see how well you did or what are the areas to improve in, right? So, and this closes what we would call a response cycle. You have planned a response, you implement it, and then also you put in together a post-distribution monitoring to close that cycle.
Now, we don't want to scare the churches and make you feel that this is very complicated. We have seen churches putting these plans together in place within a few days of work.
In Australia, the ADRA team have been running workshops at local churches to help them work on their CHEMPs. And after the workshops, we provide ongoing support so they can call and ask questions as they complete the template. So if you're watching this in Australia and you're interested in having a disaster-ready church workshop at your church, you can go to ADRA Australia's website, scroll down to the green section, click on Disaster Ready Church and submit an expression of interest. So if you don't hear back from us within the next couple of days, give the ADRA office a call and ask to talk to someone about Disaster Ready Church.
Let me also add that if you are a country office in Asia or maybe around the world, just get in touch with the ADRA office, and if not, you could write to me on my adraasia email address and we will put it on the screen there, right? Okay, so let's get into standards, moving this discussion forward. It's very important for us to follow some internationally recognized standards, it's mainly because it's actually very useful to help us plan our responses and to do our responses better. There are many standards in this space, but we want to recommend that the churches pay attention to two main standards. The first one is called the Sphere Standard, and the other one is called the Core Humanitarian Standards.
What did you say, Prabhu? Spear? That sounds crazy. I mean scary.
No, I think he said sphere.
Yes, he said spear, which is what we like to call the Bible of disaster response.
Okay, so really sphere, not spear, sphere.
Okay, let me put it this way. Say there has been a disaster in your community and more than 2,000 people are affected. Okay, and then you do a needs assessment and you identify that the biggest need is shelter and food items, right? And you also identify that these 2,000 people are in 7 camps right now, temporarily, which are quite dirty. And you also foresee that they will need water and other hygiene items in the future.
Okay, so that sounds really realistic. That's a realistic scenario. I remember that when I was deployed to Dinagat Islands to conduct a needs assessment, you will see that. You get to talk to barangay officials, you get to talk to community members, and you ask them what do they need, and they tell you they badly need water, and then food, hygiene, and sleeping material. And they're telling you, and they're in the midst of like piles of like wood and their house is destroyed and all. It's really a very sad scenario also.
Yeah, I remember that kind of experience also.
So then, how do you decide like the quantity of water that needs to be delivered, or what exactly to provide as food, or what is the minimum sort of amount needed to sustain life? Because we're trying to sustain life, and they're in survival mode. But if we provide more than what's needed, probably some things are going to go to waste, or we won't be able to help as many people as we could. But if we don't put in enough, then are we actually really helping?
Well said, KJ. You know, and this was the situation in the past. After the genocide in Rwanda, it was actually identified that humanitarian interventions were not systematic enough. And it was actually not delivering aid very effectively. And therefore, humanitarian actors across the world got together and said, we need to really have some minimum standards. And this is when this Sphere project was put into place.
Okay.
So it was born out of necessity. But the Sphere standards were never mandatory, but only recommendations, which means no one can force us to use. But within the last decade or two, it has actually been very well accepted because it makes a lot of sense. Using standards are voluntary. I think these standards have saved many lives, so let's get it on with it. Prabuk, what is Sphere?
Before Prabuk say something about the Sphere and all, something just really popped up into my mind while we were discussing about standards, how many should we give, or the amount, the quantity. I do remember that story in the Bible where, and it was a humanitarian crisis where the Israelites were in the desert. And then they had no food, and then God was like, okay, I'll give you food. And then he was like presenting the manna, the food from, and then he had specific amounts, and he had specific instructions, especially on Friday, that they have to double what they had to get so that to sustain them for the Sabbath.
Thank you, Chantal. That's a good example from the Bible. So the Sphere project or Sphere is mainly three things. Number one, it's a handbook, right? It's a handbook. Then second, it is a broad process of collaboration. And third, it is an expression of commitment to quality and accountability, right? Sphere is based on two core beliefs. How many? Two core beliefs, okay? The first one, that all possible steps should be taken to alleviate human suffering arising out of calamity and conflict. Second, that those affected by disaster have a right to life with dignity and therefore a right to assistance.
Okay, and the Sphere Handbook comprises of the Humanitarian Charter, the Protection Principles, the Core Humanitarian Standard, and Minimum Humanitarian Standards in 4 vital areas of response. And those 4 areas are, number 1, water supply, sanitation, and hygiene promotion, which we call WASH. Number 2, food security and nutrition. And number 3, shelter, settlement, and non-food items. And the last one is health.
Okay, so let's get into a more concrete example, and let's see how we can actually use the Sphere standards and apply these minimum standards. Let's go into an example, okay? So let's say a church had actually identified that they have a large piece of land around the church and they can accommodate people who are affected by a disaster. And they open their doors to about 4,000 people who come in and set up tent, let's say, okay? Now, very soon, the lack of water becomes apparent. How much of water do we need to supply to these 4,000 people?
Wow, I mean, that is a very complicated decision. I drink about 2.5 liters per day when I do remember. So would we have to deliver that much?
Good. I think you are going down the right path, Chantal, right? So you have a minimum standard that is specific to you, okay? 2.5, okay? Yes. 2.5 liters, okay. So let's go into the manual, and I would like to encourage our viewers to go and just Google the Sphere standards. You will find a handbook there, and if you go under water supply and hygiene promotion, you will be able to find this, right? So, Shaina?
Okay.
Sorry, Sean.
So yes, once we're there, once our viewers are in that section, what do we do in that section, Shaina?
So you have to go under Section 2, Water Supply. Section 2.1 is called Access and Water Quality. It goes on to say people have equitable and affordable access to a sufficient quantity of safe water to meet their drinking and domestic needs. You can scroll farther down and you will see the minimum standards for water supply. So based on this, we know that the minimum quantity of water required for survival is 2.5 to 3 liters. So Sean, you were correct. Congratulations.
I noticed it also says that we would need between 2 to 6 litres for hygiene practices and from 3 to 6 litres for basic cooking. So that makes a total then of about 7.5 to 15 litres.
Okay, so why does it have to say 3 to 6? Why is it giving a range? Is it 3 or is it 6? Or
I guess because every situation is a little different. There may be some cultures that use more water just because of the way they do things. Also, it might be because of the weather. It could be the rainy season, or if it's somewhere that's really dry and hot, then you might need more water.
so that's why you have a range, so that in case this is where you have to be in.
So coming back to my question, how much of drinking water should we provide if we decide to go with 3 liters per day per person?
Okay, let me save you all from the math. That would be 4,000, according to Sir Prabhuk's example, 4,000 multiplied by 3. So 12,000 liters of water per day. I am so
Perfect.
smart.
I can see that you are really good in math, Sean.
Not in real life.
But see how simple it is when you have a standard to follow, right? So it's very easy to make these calculations.
But aren't there situations, Prabhuk, wherein you will not be able to find a water source that produces this much?
Very good observation, and that is something that comes out by using these standards, because then you know that the water source that you have is not sufficient. You can either look at different water sources that are available, or you could actually even go back and say that, well, we really can't handle 4,000 people, right? Now, we encourage our viewers to go again to the Sphere website, take up the free training, which is really good and recommended. We actually make it more or less mandatory that ADRA staff who are responding take this course. You can look at it. We will put the details on screen right now. But let's shift gears a little bit and let's now move into discussing a little bit about the core humanitarian standards.
Okay, as you can see also on the screen, hopefully, these statements that provide clear standards for organizations to operate under in a disaster.
Okay, so now we'll be discussing the core humanitarian standards. So I'll be reading these statements, and I'd like to ask you guys to help me out. First, humanitarian response is appropriate and relevant. KJ, what does this mean?
So your response, if it's going to be appropriate, if it's going to be relevant and meet actual needs, then you need to know what your community is like. That's why that step, my community, was so important. We need to know who's there. We need to know who's vulnerable. And we need to know what they might need in the event of a disaster before we can make a plan that is actually appropriate and relevant.
Okay, so it's possible that there are like responses that is not relevant and appropriate.
I think in the humanitarian space, we have made a lot of improvements during the last few years, but it was quite common maybe 20 years ago to send shipments of things from different parts of the world when a disaster strikes. And then when you open these shipments, you find things that are really not relevant, right? But these were good-hearted people giving to really help. But what's the use in distributing, I would say maybe wool coats or jerseys in the Philippines, for example? They might never be used, right? Because it's not so cold. So this is what this standard is talking about. It has to be appropriate. It has to be also relevant. I remember once we got donations of clothes and the clothing was not really suitable to deliver in that community. It would have been relevant to another community. But if ADRA had gone ahead and delivered those clothes, I think we would have fallen into a big trouble.
Yes, I would just like to pick on that. Kuya Gary, Recto, my previous project manager, he mentioned that there was this, Taal volcano erupted, and then everybody sent clothes, and then the clothes that they sent were primarily for women, and said some men were actually wearing skirts and blouses already. And then it was like piles and mountains of clothes already. And then the people were like, can you please not give us clothes anymore?
Yeah.
Because we have enough. So this is like giving me an impression that yes, we may have good intentions, like we want to help, but we have to be smart when it comes to helping.
This could also be actually the situation when you provide something that requires specific technology. For example, if you provide water pumps to be used, and if those parts are not available in that country or in that setup, then it becomes a big problem to maintain. Right?
Okay, and it'll not be of use. Second, Shaina, humanitarian response is effective and timely.
Yeah, in a disaster, and if we're planning to do an intervention, we must provide help and support with quality and give it on time to alleviate their suffering immediately.
Oh, and give it on time.
Yeah,
On time.
this is a big subject because we run into problems quite a bit. Now, if you distribute cash, and if cash is actually relevant in that context, and if this is going to be an acceptable response and feasible, you would do it, and it actually avoids this issue with timeliness because you're giving it directly to the people. But sometimes if you are going to distribute goods, once you go through a procurement process, the needs have changed so fast, right? I think China might have had so many experiences like this. Now, something that is also felt in other countries, apart from the Philippines, is that many governments require organizations like ADRA to get approvals. And sometimes these approvals take a long time, so that when the aid actually is, when the kits are approved, they are maybe 2 or 3 months late. There are situations like that. So then it might still be useful, but it was definitely not timely.
Yes, I was once a survivor, a typhoon survivor, and I love how Shaina mentioned that the support would be with quality. It was Typhoon Sendong still, and then a lot of our organizations gave us something, and we're so happy that but we will never forget that one organization who gave us a good quality of rice. Yes, I mean, something that I hope our churches will always do. It's not just really about the quantity, but the quality of help that we're extending also. And that gives a lasting impression to our community partners. Prabhu, I guess you have something to add.
Yeah, I was just going to also say this is one thing we also struggle with in Australia. Sometimes roads will get cut off, by floodwaters, or fires, mean that roads are closed by the authorities, and so it's difficult to get through and get the aid. But our local churches often in the community, if a disaster happened close to them, they're going to be better positioned to be able to distribute quickly. So, yeah, it's one of the benefits of having people who are prepared, who are local.
Yes, that's why we have to really push and invite everybody to be a disaster ready.
I'm just realizing, Chantal.
Yes.
I don't know whether this is relevant to Shaina. Out of the 4 of us, are you the only person who has been on the receiving end of a disaster?
I don't know. Maybe.
Have you received? So you have been on both sides, right?
Yes, and that's very strange. When I entered ADRA and started to work with the disaster and, responding and all, I really felt so weird. So I was like, I was once a receiver. Now I'm here organizing, coordinating, making sure these people receive. And that's really that's why I go there and I talk. And because the water was up here, sir, when that flooding happened, and it was massive, it was big, it was Christmas season and all. That was almost 10 years ago.
And your house was affected?
Our house was affected, and I will never forget that experience up until now. this, where we're shooting right now, Cagayan de Oro City, everybody, at that time, will never. And then, yes, I have been on the receiving end. So be careful, guys. So third, humanitarian response strengthens local capacities and avoid negative effects.
Right, so the intention of this is to remind responders that we need to help communities to recover and to also prepare for future interventions, right? So ideally, the next time around, they might be able to do the response themselves. But broadly speaking, this is talking about not doing any harm, not doing more harm as a result of our response.
Okay. And KJ, can you enlighten us with the fourth statement? It says humanitarian response is based on communication, participation, and feedback.
Yes, communication is so important in a disaster. I've heard those I work with say, and I know this comes from Robert Patton, who was one of the people who initiated the ideas behind the Disaster Ready Church program, and I know who was a mentor for you, Prabuk, right? And I haven't met him yet, but I would really love to meet you, Robert. And others have told me, you said, the three most important things in a disaster are communication, communication, and communication. So communication is really important. Things can go so wrong if you can't communicate effectively within your team and share information promptly and accurately. So important. And that participation part, we talked yesterday when we cracked the code in the conduct, cracked the code of conduct and understood it better, that involving those people that we're helping is so important, giving them some agency and some choice and giving them the opportunity to give us feedback so we can do it better. That's really important.
Just to add, since KJ, since you mentioned Robert Patman, just to clarify, he's not related to General George Patton, who was a significant figure in the Second World War, but he is a significant figure in ADRA, and I'm bringing it up because Robert was one of the key people who put this Disaster Ready Church manual together and this whole concept together, right? So shout out to Robert Patton.
Shout out. Yes. Now we're down to the fifth statement, and it says here, complaints. Complaints are welcomed and addressed.
Yeah, we should ensure that during the response, you have this complaints mechanism where the survivors can report problems if they are unhappy with the support we provide or with the way our staff treat them if they have any suggestions or feedback about the response. No one should harm them if you make a complaint, if you will take action in response to the complaints.
That's fair. I do remember when we go on disaster response, we put this little box and paper and pen, and if you have something to say, then tell us. It's participative, right? And our also the point of view of our not just beneficiaries but community partners. They feel like they really do care about what we have to say.
During our response also, we usually announce if they have any complaints, feedback, or suggestion. They can go to me or the volunteers that is around, or they can message us through our Facebook Messenger or we give them a phone number where they can make a message.
Yes, and that also gives a sense of responsibility or obligation to the staff, to the team members. 6, Prabuk, humanitarian response is coordinated and complementary.
So this is talking about working together with others to provide meaningful support, right? So to combine our knowledge and resources to meet the needs of the people. An example, you may be a church that can provide water supply for the 4,000 beneficiaries from our example. However, this water alone is not enough. Who will give them the soap to maintain personal hygiene, brooms to take care of the environmental cleanliness, all of this. You can partner with another church, another faith-based organization, or another NGO or the government to provide. So complementing each other so that you don't duplicate also at the same time. So this is what it talks about here.
Okay, collaboration is the key. Okay. Now, 7th, humanitarian actions continuously learn and improve.
Yes, learning continually and improving continually is so important. I mean, especially in disaster responses. There's no such thing as a perfect response. There's always things you can learn, and disasters are really humbling even for people who are experts, because they do unexpected things and they come at unexpected times, and there's a lot of problem solving involved, and there's only one who is perfect, and that's God. So ADRA is made of human beings. I know it's not perfect because I work there. You know, no organisation on earth is perfect, and we've all got to just look at what we've done in the past, figure out why things maybe didn't work as well as they could have, and try and make them better in the future so that we can help people.
So you mean ADRA Australia is not perfect?
No, sorry to break it to you. Not since I joined.
I'd like to ask him, like, how many years have you been working in emergency response?
I've been in ADRA for 16 years now.
16
and
years.
Yeah, 2009 was my first emergency response.
Oh, and then how important is this statement, especially that you're handling the humanitarian response in Asia? Like, have you gone to a point where, I know everything now by now?
Never. Every experience is new. And like I mentioned, even the humanitarian space is something that keeps on growing, right?
So it keeps being updated.
Correct.
And you communicate to each other also, learning from
It's very important to stay updated.
Okay. Now, thanks, Prabuk and KJ. 8 staff are supported to do their job effectively, and are treated fairly and equitably.
Yeah, before actually going to the response, we make sure that we are all giving the staffs, volunteers, or partners, we have a proper orientation so that, or we should make sure that they have the skills and experience to support the affected people. They should be treated with dignity at all costs, especially in these traumatic times.
Yes, and then we eat together. I remember that, to the volunteers. And they have t-shirts.
Yeah.
So.
This is a very important point, because staff care is something that now, many people take care of this, but then it's important to take care of your team. They're the ones who are responding, and they're going through a lot of stress as well. They're seeing these traumatic pictures, scenes in front of them. They are going through even personal struggles because they are away from their family. So it's very important to take care of the team that responds as well.
Amen. And that, I think, will enlighten our special episode for the psychological first aid. And last statement, resources are managed and used responsibly for their intended purpose.
Right. So in short, this is talking about limiting waste. To make sure that you get the most out of the resources you have, do it as effectively as possible, so that the people who have now experienced this disaster gets the maximum support out of what you have.
Yes, and
So, if you talk about the core humanitarian standards, and if I may share a little bit more here, currently these standards are being reviewed. So as we speak, there are several meetings and consultations going around the world, and they're doing an excellent job. We expect that in 2024, these standards, a new revised list of standards will come. I think there might be maybe 7 instead of 9. I'm not sure what it will look like, but it might be maybe drafted a little better. However, the principles and the motivation behind it will remain the same. Like I mentioned, Chantal, the humanitarian space is continually improving, continually growing, and it's important for our churches to also be aware of this.
Yeah, it's a reflection of human beings and humanity. We humans will learn and we relearn and unlearn and all those.
Exactly.
Now, I just have a question. Our previous episode, we talked about cracking the code. That was 10 statements, code of conduct, and now we're talking about core humanitarian standards. What was the difference?
Yeah, so we have been discussing on the code of conduct, core humanitarian standards, and the sphere standards, right? So this is how I understand it, and I'm happy to hear your view on this. The code of conduct is more of a personal commitment, or how you behave as an individual, your attitude and your approach towards what you do. It's more aimed at the individual. The core humanitarian standard is focused more on how we operate as a collection of people or as an organization, how we plan our responses and how we actually behave as a collective group. And sphere standards is more about meeting minimum standards based on the needs in the field. So this is how I understand the three.
Okay. And also, since we're all here in a humanitarian organization in ADRA Philippines, would it be, like talking to our church members right now, would it be safe to say that, because the response, this step is where everybody is so excited, because this is where the action and where everything gets to be applied and all. But after that, you have experienced responses. My question is it safe to say that you would become like a better person once you involve in this? I mean, I'd like to ask your thoughts.
Tough question.
Yeah. I mean,
Thank you for that, Chantal.
that desire.
Thank you for stepping out of the script.
This is not
Throwing us into the deep end.
or the desire to be what, like.
Yeah, I don't think God means us to go through hard times, but I do believe that He can bring good out of them, and He uses those times to build our character. You know, the things that we go through, definitely.
So it builds our character.
I think it humbles you. I think it humbles you. I guess you can also go a different path. You can take a different path and say, well, I'm very proud because we are doing this, and but. My personal experience is that has humbled me and made me feel grateful for what I have.
Okay, Shaina.
Yeah, I'm with their answers. No, it really helps us and it improves us on our experiences on the emergencies. It helps us where we are right now.
Okay. And since we still have more time to discuss, guys, this would be something that I think our viewers, church members all over the world would be interested to listen to. I mean, we have been in ADRA. Can you cite one specific response that you will never forget, and then why? Where was it? And then what was the scenario? Like you were there to coordinate or to respond, and things that you have learned, especially in light to our core humanitarian standards. So would like to go first.
I can't tell an experience of my own, of a response, but I hope the bigger church won't mind me telling a little story of theirs. Now, they experienced some severe bushfires in that area, and there were a lot of people evacuated to a showground, which was just across the road from their church. And there were a lot of people that couldn't go there because they had pets, and the showground wasn't allowing people with pets to go into where they could evacuate. So the church spontaneously opened their doors and let people with pets, they pushed the pews back in their sanctuary and allowed, I think it was about 33 people, and I think there were 11 or 12 dogs, all came in and stayed there for almost 2 days. And so I'm sure they would have had to have cleaned the carpet afterwards. But the fact that they were willing to do that made such an impact. The community will never forget that they were the people that let them in. And our churches at that local level can have such an impact just by being willing, even if their plan isn't perfect or something happens and they're not expecting it, if they're just willing to pull together and be there for the community.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
you have a lot.
There was one time when when I was quite new. We were responding in an IDP camp, internally displaced persons, a camp, and all you could see is tents. There was about 300,000 people in that area, and I was standing, and it was a newly cleared area. It was a jungle area that was cleared for the people to come and settle down. And I found a tree to stand under because it was so hot, and I was looking for a shade. And there were tents all around me, and I was feeling a little overwhelmed. And there was a little commotion going on in a tent. And when I inquired, they said an old gentleman just passed away. And that for me was my very big eye-opener. Death and destruction all around. And I really felt bad at the moment because I was fussing that it was too hot and sunny, and I was looking for a shade.
And then here
And
comes...
just next to me, there was someone's father who passed away, you know. So you go through these things, and I want to highlight that this is the world we live in. It's not going to get any better, right? And that is why we as a church, we understand that this is our mission, to represent Christ to the people around us. And every faith has this very pure motivation to help people in need. And that is why I hope the churches will really pick this Disaster Ready Church program up, look at the manuals and run with it, and do what you can to prepare. Because you will never know when a disaster will strike, and you have to be there and be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Thank you, Pastor. Sir. Shaina.
Mine was maybe during my very ever first response, and that was in Typhoon Odette. I was really told 2 days before I will be deployed to the field, because most of us are already in the field.
Yes, we were deployed.
Yeah, and maybe they have no choice but to
Send
me there, to deploy me there. And it was really my first, and maybe they have they give me orientation about it, but when you're really in the field, it's a different scenario, it's a different challenge that you will face. And when I was there and look at the place, it was really struck, devastated, and I can only say, I used only to see this on the television, and now is this really true?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really I have pondered, or I have realized that maybe this is the reason why God put me here on ADRA, to be an instrument also to help to other people.
Oh, thank you, Shaina. Thanks, guys. This is really important. This is where everything then comes alive. I mean, we can always prepare, but when as you have mentioned, wow, this is what I only see on TV, but in reality, it can be much more than as we expect. Thank you, everybody. What's your last message, takeaway for viewers? What you'd like to remind them before we go? Shaina?
Yeah, we are actually on the last component, and we are about to end these episodes of Disaster Ready Church. I have been exposed to this kind of topics, but I am still learning new things, especially about from what does the Bible say about the disaster, assessing our capacity, our church capacity, building teams, and then how to do our response. Everything is, I am still learning new things about it. And it's really nice also for the churches or other faith, or wherever faith groups you belong, to engage on this and watch also these episodes with your members of in the churches.
Yes. KJ?
Yeah, my takeaway is to never stop learning. And I'm really grateful to be here with the team from the ADRA Philippines, because they do a lot more responses here. You have a lot more disasters, and I've learned a lot just by, being with you and talking with you about these topics. And it's just so important that we always continue to keep that journey of learning. We get that feedback, we seek that feedback, and we learn from it.
Amen.
So I think my takeaway, I'm going to change a little bit of
That's what you planned.
So my takeaway is that you can really be effective if you plan, if you plan well. And the 4 simple steps and the Disaster Response Ready Church manual will help you to plan. So churches, please take it up, be serious about it, and do it.
Yes, thanks everybody. And mine would be, I would like to invite you to watch out for the next episode. We will be talking about psychological first aid, and we'll be discussing that it's not just physical needs that our survivors should have. I mean, the church, as a church, we can do more, and we can answer their psychological needs or spiritual needs. And please do watch out for the last and special episode on psychological first aid.
Remember, we must be #disaster ready church, and we can be by making ourselves and what we have available. It starts with that.
And to be a disaster-ready church, your ADRA family is here to help you. That's why you mustn't miss out on the next episode on PFA. And by the way, we would really like to thank the Hope Channel team here in the South Philippines. They are doing a fantastic job, especially helping us to produce disaster-ready church educational materials like this.
ADRA Australia, ADRA Angels, thank you again.
Yes, and thanks everybody for being here and talking. So we're down with our 4 steps, and then we have a special episode after this. So we'd like to see you once again only here on
ADRA TV.